Welcome back to Inside College Basketball Now with John Rothstein. Pleased to be joined by Syracuse head coach Adrian Autry. And Adrian, let's get right to it. How did Adrian Autry become red?
Can't see it now, but the hair was a little red back in the day, and a little my complexion a little bit. That's all. That's about. So. Yeah, I used to have some reddish hair, but you can't see it anymore. It's white now, so I just cut it off.
Who gave you that nickname?
I was born with it. My dad is Big Red. I'm Little Red, so I was born with the nickname.
All right. Well, that is obviously a lasting memory that you'll always have, but so is the place where you played and now coach. I'm curious, what was your first memory of Syracuse basketball?
My first memory was back in the day. It was called the Dome Ranger, and those big, Syracuse Georgetown games, and guys like Derek Coleman and Sherman Douglas and Pearl Washington playing in this massive arena, and just like, just watching it. And back then, it was the Big East. So those are my first early memories of looking at that place and looking at the atmosphere and the teams that they had, an exciting brand of basketball, and that was what attracted me.
And obviously the person that was the architect of that era of Syracuse basketball was Jim Boeheim. When was the first time that you and Coach Boeheim met in person?
Well, back in the day, the recruiting wasn't the way it is now. But I probably met Coach face-to-face probably my sophomore year in open gym. Back then, those were big in September. All the coaches would come out. And I had, I had a pretty good high school team. So, I had some guys that were getting recruited also, so they were getting an early look at us.
How early on in the process did you know that you wanted to go to Syracuse?
For me, I didn't really think about college until I got into my senior year that September. And that summer, when the summer ended, I started sitting down with my mom and my AAU coach, my high school coach, and, started trying to plan some visits out. And, I had a good buddy of mine who was a huge Syracuse fan. He loved Syracuse. He was like,
right.
They're recruiting you, man. You got to go take that visit, man, the Dome and da-da-da-da. So obviously they made the list. And so that was when I really started, really focusing on where I was going to go at for college, going into my senior year.
And you had a great career at Syracuse, had a great career as a player, but at some point you had to decide that you wanted to coach after you were done playing. When was that moment?
It was after I retired, probably 3 years after I retired playing in Europe. It just happened where I brought my family up for alumni weekend, and they had a little game, and I was still kind of playing at that time, and I played in the game. And after the game, Coach met with Coach, introduced me to my family because I hadn't seen Coach in since I left, and introduced me to my family. And then he asked me what I was doing, and at the time I was in real estate, and he was like, "What are you doing that for? You need to be back in basketball." So he kind of, put that bug in my ear, and once I left, I started just getting back involved in the game, because once I finished, I hadn't done anything in basketball for like 2 or 3 years.
And you came up through the ranks. I remember you when you were an assistant coach at Virginia Tech, but you eventually obviously came back to your alma mater to be an assistant at Syracuse. How did the relationship change with Jim Boeheim when you went from being a former player to now a member of his staff?
He started talking to me a little bit more, not screaming at me. He actually listened to me a little bit more. No, it was at that point he's always going to be coach, and he was coach. But just the relationship had matured, and he allowed me to grow. He allowed me to gave me a lot of freedom to do things with and help in development and being a big part of the program, and me playing for him and understanding what was really important for him. I thought that made my transition a lot easier than it was if I would have, been an assistant coach with another coach.
How unique is that, though, when you go from being somebody's point guard, somebody's player, to then transition to spending all this time with them as an adult?
I think you always kind of reflect about, man, he used to get on me about this. And now as you're sitting there, we're preparing and we're developing and we're talking about these players, you just get a little bit better understanding of why why he coached that way or why he would challenge certain players that way. So it was really interesting just to see, how he thought about players and what his development process was, and how he coached different guys different ways, and the reasons why he did that. That was so, instrumental in developing me as a coach as well.
And obviously, there came a time where you guys had, many discussions, but there was one big discussion, I'm sure, and that's when he talked to you about being his successor. When was that moment?
That was everything was so fast, and I think everything happened pretty quickly. Right, right. It wasn't something that I think that was planned out, so to speak. It was really kind of it was real live. It was almost like real live TV. So we eventually had the not real live TV. What do they call that?
Reality TV.
Reality TV. We were going through it at the same time, and but he sat down and when we talked, he was happy. He was proud. He was proud. He was happy. He thought I was ready. And the one thing he said is, I'll be there if you need me. And that's kind of how he's always approached it. And he has. He's been super supportive. But the conversation was, it was important to have.
Red, was there ever a time prior to being named the head coach at Syracuse that you almost left for another head coaching opportunity?
No, I think at the time that I was getting, me personally, I was ready for an opportunity to become a head coach at that time. So everything kind of time, the timing kind of worked out. So I never really kind of got a chance to start that process and go down that road. But I know at that time, when everything happened, for me personally, I thought that I was ready, and so, I got very fortunate that when I thought I was ready, this opportunity opened up.
And now you're a couple years into this journey. What is the biggest thing you know today about being the head coach at Syracuse that you didn't know when you got the job?
The everyday, the everyday, you're fighting for, everything, your culture, everything, as a head coach, as an assistant coach, you kind of, you're doing your job and you kind of know it, but, as a head coach sitting here, you're trying to, stay connected, stay energized and stay, pushing that message because it is a journey, fighting for that message to be heard and letting it really soak in. And it's every day, like it's every day. It's not just one day. So the consistency part of it.
It's interesting. The Syracuse that you were drawn to as a player is not the same Syracuse that really exists today from a league perspective, because you were drawn to playing in the Carrier Dome at the time against, great Big East rivals like Georgetown and UConn, and now Syracuse is in the ACC. How do you think being a member of the ACC has changed the Syracuse job?
Well, I think obviously you lost a lot of those relationships that our community. The one thing about Syracuse is that it's the people that come to the game, they are community, family. So it's a little different. So they grow up on it. So it's like passed down. Season ticket holders are like generations, passed down to passed down, passed down.
Right.
So they hear those stories. So obviously it's an adjustment. You lost a lot of rivalries. You lost a lot of familiarity with different programs. And so it's been some time adjusting, as we adjusted to the ACC, our program and our fan base has had to adjust to that as well and try to create these new memories and these new, teams that they identify with. And we've, that's been a challenge.
Well, obviously, that's something all coaches have to navigate when they have to deal with realignment, but you're in the middle of that process. I know, like you said, it's a daily battle, but let's focus on your team now. Give me your impressions on the roster you've assembled throughout the first couple of weeks of this season.
I think we went into this year. You wanted to address some positional size, some athleticism, blending some some offense with defensive players, defensive mindsets. We wanted to blend that and connect everybody. So the first first 4 games, 3 games, we've had some success, but we still work in progress. Some things that we need to work on. But overall, I've been pleased with our level 5 effort so far. You know, we talked about, you know, gassing out and really being intentional and with our effort, and that's been consistent for the most part.
Red, why do you think this can be your best team that you've had yet at Syracuse?
Well, I think you know, everyone, you know, including myself, are in we have a clearer picture of what we're doing. We have a team that we feel like they all complement each other on the court, and I think that's a good recipe for success.
Well, and obviously, anytime you want to have a breakthrough season, you need things to fall into place. You guys had a little bit of an early setback with an injury to J.J. Starling. What percentage would you say he's at right now as you get ready to go to Las Vegas next week and play some big-time games?
He's back. He'll be ready. We got a game under his belt, so we'll be ready. We're looking forward to it. We just are getting, working and getting ready. So hopefully we'll be 100% whole by the time we get on that plane.
And this opportunity to play in Las Vegas next week is also another showcase opportunity for Nathan George, a kid I loved at Georgia Tech, who gives you another table-setting point guard in your backcourt. How big was it to put another playmaker next to J.J. Starling?
It was imperative. It was really important. JJ is a guy that can slide on and off the ball, but I think, to free him up to be able to score and to be able to have two playmakers, two guys that can make plays, that was imperative for us. And to be able to gap someone like Nathan George was, that was what the guy that we needed and we wanted. So I was totally thrilled when we got him, and he's been great for us. He set the tone. He's settling in. He's starting to understand, where these guys need to get the ball and how we're playing and what the expectations are. So we're excited to have him.
And another player that may come to the forefront for you guys next week is somebody that Syracuse fans are familiar with, at least in terms of the family, and that's Kiyan Anthony. He very quietly has effortlessly transitioned to scoring the basketball in college. What has allowed him out of the gate to be so effective offensively?
I think he's worked hard over the summer. He's gotten better over the summer. He's improved his body. He's improved his shot making. The things that he needed to improve, he has improved on, and he has a natural ability with that. So, and I think his confidence. He has unbelievable, unshakable confidence, and I think you need to have that. I know you need to have that as a player. Anything in life that you do, you got to have that type of confidence, and he has that.
It's interesting. You have somebody in Kiyan who obviously is a very, very talented freshman, but his father was one of the great freshmen to ever play college basketball, led obviously your alma mater to a national title in 2003. When you were recruiting him, how did you balance, obviously, the fact that he could have a great experience at Syracuse, but he was going to have the shadow of his father, Carmelo Anthony, over him all the time? I mean, the practice facility is named the Carmelo Anthony Center.
Yeah. No, I think the biggest thing is we were very fortunate to get a chance to follow his development from 9th grade on because of that relationship, and to watch him grow and to see him grow. It was really about him. It wasn't anything about his father. We never talked about, that. That was something that, was like already known. But
Right.
I thought, we had a chance to really build a relationship with him, and it was really about the opportunity that he would have here and him doing it his way, and be able to walk his own path, even though it is, his father. But the opportunity, I thought everything was aligned for him to come here and be ready to play.
Players today and college kids today have it so different than obviously when you and I were growing up. You were obviously a much better player than I was, because that's why I'm behind the microphone right now. But, you learn to play to your strengths in life, Fred.
Mm-hmm.
But, now with social media and all the things these kids have to deal with, there's so much pressure. And I'm not just talking about Kiyan Anthony, but it's so much pressure for all these kids just to perform, to seek acceptance. How much in your coaching right now do you have to explain to these guys that being good and being consistent is not the enemy of being excellent or outstanding?
That's well said. We call them stressors, and we really, it's daily. It's daily trying to keep them focused on what your team is doing and trying to block out the noise and trying to eliminate stressors. So it's something daily that I think every coach deals with, and you kind of try to address it. You want them to be, on the bus, in this bus, and not on the outside, not outside of the bus. But it's something daily that I think most coaches, it's a real thing. So many stressors, there's so many distractions that these young men have to deal with, and you want to just be able to try to alleviate that and try to get them to focus solely on trying to eliminate a couple of those stressors, right? You just you really do, and you're fighting for that every day.
Red, obviously your mission is to make Syracuse basketball the program that everybody grew up with during obviously Jim Boeheim's prime years, and that's your quest every single day. And your program is going to get multiple major opportunities to make national statements here over the next couple of weeks. You're going to get Houston and Kansas in Las Vegas. The third game's to be determined. And then you're going to get Tennessee after that in the ACC SEC Challenge. What are your emotions knowing that you're about to step up a weight class and face, at least three programs that have gone very, very deep in the last couple of NCAA tournaments?
It's a great opportunity for us. I think for me personally, it's something that, is just the way you spoke about that. That's what Syracuse basketball program is, right? Like, and I think that's what we're excited about, to be able to, we haven't been what we needed to be in the last couple of years. So we're excited about the opportunity. And with this group of guys right here, I'm excited to get out there and, again, represent Syracuse. But, it's a good opportunity for us, and we're excited. That's what I would say. I say we're excited to get there and to get our name back on people's minds and get people to understand, we are the sixth winningest program in college basketball history.
No doubt. That's the program that everybody remembers from the 90s to 2000s and on. And your first crack at obviously making a statement is going to be against, a program in Houston that's been so consistent under Kelvin Sampson. Give me your early impressions of the Cougs as you prepare.
Obviously, Hall of Fame coach, great program. Again, when you talk about Houston, the physicality part of it, the rebounding part. And they have, they're very good offensively this year. I think a lot of people, people identify them on that defensive side of the ball, and they're still good there. But I think this year, they have some offensive firepower. They have three really good guards and a talented freshman. So again, this will be fun for us. We're excited for the challenge. And again, with Houston, it's going to be a 40-minute game, and that's what we are preparing for. To go in there and, play for 40 minutes.
And anytime you obviously go against Houston and a team coached by Kelvin Sampson, the game is going to be won and lost with how competitive you're going to be on the backboard. So over the next couple of days in practice, when you talk to your front court players, Donnie Freeman, William Kyle, Sadiq White, what is going to be the message in terms of competing with Houston on the glass?
I think for those guys, that's that's something that they understand. For me, it's really the perimeter guys. People talk about their front court, but their perimeter. Those guys are the guys that you really got to keep off the glass as well. The wings, those guys go to the glass as well. So I think our front court, they understand the job that needs to be done. It's really getting that message across to our perimeter guys. Because they send 3 and 4 guys to the rim at all times, and their guards are all good offensive rebounding guards.
Well, you were a great perimeter player a long time ago when you were obviously doing your thing at Syracuse. As a former perimeter player and a former maestro with the ball, what are your early impressions of Kingston Flemings?
Oh man, a guy that can initiate offense, quick first step. He's very good in closeout situations. He's probably one of the more talented freshmen that, obviously he's starting to get a little power, but he's up there. He's very talented, two-way guy. Obviously he's at Houston, so you got to be that. But I've been his quickness, his shot making, and his passing. He's one of the better guards that I've watched so far this year in the country.
Things have changed, obviously, Red, in terms of non-conference schedules. You know, we're in a different time right now where schools obviously need to take on opportunities that can benefit their program monetarily. You're in the Players era this year. You're in the ACC SEC Challenge. There was no game against Georgetown this year. I'm curious, as you're the steward of this program moving forward, how do you want Syracuse's non-conference schedule to look?
We have to go challenge ourselves. We want it to be exciting. We want to be part of these events that we're in right now. Every year, we're going to go out and challenge ourselves and give ourselves an opportunity to see where we're at before we get into conference play and the experience. That's what the college experience is about, to be able to be part of the Players era and go out there and play against, other great programs, we're always going to challenge ourselves in in the non-conference to play teams and see where we're at. We're going to challenge ourselves. And you have to, in today's world, if you want to make the tournament, you have to have a very competitive non-conference schedule.
There's obviously so many built-in rivalries for Syracuse with programs that are not in the ACC right now, thanks to Syracuse's history in the Big East. Is rekindling a rivalry with Georgetown or other, former rivals that, are in the Big East right now something you want to do and would like to do moving forward, to play more games in the Northeast and maybe the New York metropolitan area?
I think, we're open to everything. Everything's on the table, as far as that, as far as trying to play those teams, former Big East teams, if it makes sense. And it's something that could, once we sit down with our schedule, we'll play those games. We love to try to play in New York City. We love to try to play in Washington, D.C. area, Philadelphia, Boston, that whole Northeast. We love to, play there in those places.
It's been a lean couple of years for the ACC. Only 4 of the 18 teams made the NCAA tournament last year, but it feels like the league is on a big comeback this year in 25-26. Obviously, it's still very earlier in the season, but from your perspective, why do you think the ACC is primed to be significantly better this year than it's been the past few?
Well, I look around. I think every ACC program has rich tradition in basketball, and I think if you look at these rosters from up and down now, I think everyone has improved. Everyone in our league has improved their rosters. It's great coaching here. The league is, one of the best leagues in the country, in my opinion. I'm biased, but I think everyone rosters has improved. I think, I think you're seeing that early in the non-conference.
All right, final thing. Obviously, the hope for you and all Syracuse fans is that Syracuse is one of those teams that has obviously made major improvements. What are the biggest keys for Syracuse to get back to the NCAA tournament in 2026?
Our level 5 energy. We talk about our level 5 energy maxing out and being the most connected team, and having the juice and bringing the juice and our juicing station, which is our bench. It's about us. It's not really about who we're playing against. If we can play with level 5 energy, we'll give ourselves a chance.
Well, Red, it's going to be a lot of fun to cover. Looking forward to your big games next week in Vegas and beyond. Safe travels out to Sin City, and as always, look forward to staying connected with you along the way.
Thanks, John. I appreciate it.
You got it. That's Syracuse head coach Red Autry. I'm John Rothstein, and this is Inside College Basketball Now.